to Karen's Produce and Ice Cream. They have been so gracious to loan us their space this evening. The Enders House has to undergo some repairs. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to, I'm Paul Banks. I'm the site manager at Schoharie Crossing State Site. Most of you already know me. In case you don't, I've been here 10 months now. And I'm learning the ropes. I have a lot of help. One of the people who helped, who was invaluable to the completion of the aqueduct stabilization project, was Liz Mastriani, the project engineer. She's a New York State professional engineer with a civil engineering degree from Union College. She joined New York State Parks in 2008. Her focus has been on water projects and parks throughout the state, primarily focusing on drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and most recently, park dams. This was her first aqueduct. She was the project manager on this project, trying to keep all the work progressing while the construction schedule had specific start and finish dates that were dependent on the Canal Corporation dewatering the canal and, of course, rewatering the canal. With all the contractors and equipment out on the creek, had to have it all out of the creek before the canal rewatered and the large canal reopened. And so that was extremely important to the successful completion of this project. And ruined the ending. It was a success. Okay? So I know cliffhangers go, but for some of us it wasn't a cliffhanger at all. I'm just coming on the heels of a site manager whose monumental work of preserving this monument really can't be expressed in words. I look through file after file and see the decades of work that Janice Fontanella did to make this happen. Janice was is a graduate of Bates College, cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa. She has a master's in museum studies from Cooperstown, and she has a master's in education from City Albany. She's a curator. She was a curator at the Albany Institute of History and Art. One of her duties was the Empire Plaza collection of modern art. And of course, she's also involved in historical preservation, antiquities, and whatnot at the Albany Institute. And she was kind enough to come out and manage Schoharie Crossing for 33 years. I could certainly go on with this list of people who were responsible for getting us to this point in the stabilization of the aqueduct. But Janice is there. She knows the people much better than I do. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a few minutes and going, giving us a little background on all the people who were involved, you're welcome to take the time.
So, as Paul said, this stabilization project is the end result of decades of work on a ton of people's part. There were a lot of people who were really committed to preserving the aqueduct. And it took a lot of work, a lot of people speaking up, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people working on it, engineering studies, a whole ton of people. And one of the most important people in that whole process is Craig Williams, who we're lucky to have here today. Actually wrote the nomination for Make the Aqueduct one of the Preservation League's Second to Save projects a couple of years ago. And that was sort of the thing that actually got this last step moving. And we were able to create a really great group of people. Folks from around here who probably know like Amanda Bearcraft and Gina Berry Griggs and Brian Weiss, were all on that committee, and they were all really helpful. They each had their own niche and working it. Body of people to move forward on this project, making grant money and getting grants. So there were tons of people, including a number of really great people. Thanks very much for that. Now we'll see what the process is all about.
Thank you, Janice. So Liz is here to provide engineering support. Janice is here to fill in all the names that I don't know yet. But Greg, thank you for coming. Thank all of you. Okay, so the Schoharie Aqueduct is one of the larger projects on the large canal. The original canal, Lytton's Ditch, was finished in October of 1825, and it was almost instantly over capacity. But it was almost instantly incredibly profitable. And so they realized not only what a great idea having the canal across the interstate was, but how they needed to improve it. And so they paid off the round of all the funding for the original canal and started working on the large canal. And John Jervis designed, we think, most of the aqueduct at Schoharie Crossing. And it was created in order to solve, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big problems of the entire canal. If the creek flooded, all the traffic backed up in both directions, and this cost people money. And if you had perishable goods, it could cost you your entire load. So it was a huge problem. And the pilots and the boats dreaded Schoharie Crossing on the original canal. So it was not a big deal to realize the need for an aqueduct, but not a small deal to build it. I'm so sorry about that. So you can see the Schoharie Aqueduct circa 1864. We are looking from the south, looking north. So right up here is the trough that carried the boats. This boat is in the slack water behind the dam that held back Schoharie Creek. It was incredibly important to keep a dam at this point because they were using part of the original canal to feed the next section of canal downstream. And this is probably taken from either on the bridge or close to where our visitor center is today. The aqueduct was completed in 1842. It was put into service 3 years later in 1845. I actually was meant to look up why that was. It took them 3 years to put it into service. I haven't done that yet. But it was part of a major statewide modernization of the Erie Canal. It was 624 feet long with 14 arches. It's the third largest in the Upper Mohawk. The sister aqueduct, the Rexford Aqueduct, was around the same size and dimensions. And there were other major works like this on the canal between here and Buffalo. Here I thought I would need to stretch. So we were at a point in saving the aqueduct, and it was critical. We didn't know how much longer the structure would last. It was amazing it lasted as long as it did. 6 surviving arches, the trunks, the piers. But there was something of special significance to many of us that we wanted to save in situ, in particular. And I'm sorry the contrast is not great here, but it's the Otis Eddystone that is up on the towpath, part of the capstone of Pier 6. And when we get later in the slideshow, we'll see how close that was to falling in. So canal boats would cross the creek on a windlass system originally, and then there was a bridge that the mules could go across. But having having a proper aqueduct and towpath meant no time was lost in crossing Schoharie Creek ever again. Really a major upgrade to the canal system. And actually I mentioned the dangers of the original canal at Schoharie Creek. And there was a newspaper article that said even the most experienced canal boat captains dreaded having to cross the Schoharie Creek even when it wasn't flooded. So this canal, one of the major upgrades, you're wondering who Otis Eddy was? Well, he was the builder. Now, there's an interesting Otis Eddy connection. Otis Eddy gave Ezra Cornell his first job. Some of you may know that Ezra Cornell went on to found Cornell University. So the guy who built this really is well cemented into our history in interesting ways. And of course, Ezra Cornell will go on to give Otis Eddy's son a job eventually. Now, you would think this solved all the problems, but of course, that's not a working canal today. This is one of the big problems. This is the 1904 ice jam. You see a couple of gentlemen standing on one of the piers for the trough on the south side of the aqueduct. And then from another angle, you can see those gentlemen looking out at ice that filled the valley of the creek, backed up from the point of the aqueduct. This is by no means the only time this happened. It's a major problem because in the spring floods, when the ice came down, if it froze up and then it was warmer south and the water started flowing from further up the creek, where did that water go? That water went right here. This is one of the areas that could be flooded. From here, in fact, wait, there it is. There's Gettysburg, it's right there. No, not there. It's about there. And you can see that the ice is actually up to the level of fields in this photo. I'm so used to having a remote, and I couldn't find the remote when I was packing for this. So here you can see the aqueduct in operation. You can see the railings and the trough, and actually the boat in the trough with the mules pulling that barge along. And that was the aqueduct's bread and butter. That's what it was designed to do. Isn't that amazing? But you can also notice a gentleman walking along here. Maybe he was with that boat. Maybe he just got tired of sitting on board and wanted to take a walk. They're only going 4 miles an hour. It's not like you couldn't keep up if you keep a good pace going. At least for a little while. But more likely, he's just passing on his way into Fort Hunter. And you'll notice the ruts. There's a road as well. And the people who use that road were oftentimes people coming to or from Fort Hunter. Here's the complete aqueduct of the early 20th century. Also, you'll notice the what I would assume are electrical poles. And it was used by the hamlet of Fort Hunter as a bridge to reach the land on the other side. And you want to see a close-up. Here's a close-up of how 1.5 arches was significant, as you can actually see how much of this expanse was taken up by the trough. So these are beams that came up to help support the trough between the trunks. So much of the trough was supported. Much of the trough leaked, as you can see from the water coming down here. You can't tell if there's a boat in the trough right now, and the horses are just out of the photo or what, but there is water spilling over the top. You can also see a house there, probably close to where the original canal had a boat basin on the west side of Schoharie Creek. Even the road coming down to this area. And what did the people of Fort Hunter do there? Well, what they still do today. They had fun. People from all over. It's not a private beach for Fort Hunter anymore now that we have these things called cars. But at one point there was a bathhouse on the aqueduct picnic area. There was a swimming area, fishing and picnics were quite popular then, as well as now. This image is called Canoeing with Uncle Louis Phillips. We don't know who the photographer was, nor when it was taken exactly. Now that's all wonderful, except for the ice channels. But those ice flows created problems. Not the space I'm used to working with. The ice flows created problems, and the modern barge canal, which is still in use to this day, they were able to canalize the Mohawk River. And so this became merely a bridge for recreational use for decades. It closed in 1916, and catch me if I'm wrong on this, okay? It closed in 1916, around the time that the modern barge canal opened, I believe 1917. And we saw that ice jam in 1904. Well, those kept happening. And there was a failure of part of the structure over towards the east bank in the late 1930s. And there was fear that that would cause even more ice to build up. They actually removed the trough of 1916 just so there would be more clearance. So ice would have this entire arch to go through and not just this much to go through. And you'd think that would have done it, but it didn't, especially as it began to collapse. And so I believe it was the Corps of Engineers in 1941 that took out 4 arches of the aqueduct. And this, of course, was not good for the structure because a bridge with these Roman arches is basically in compression. That's what holds it up. If you take it out of compression, then it's just a matter of time before it fails. And once they blew up the east end of the aqueduct, it was destined to fail. But keep in mind, it was 1941. We were fighting World War II. A lot of compromises had to be made. Don't blame them. But people realized the significance of the aqueduct. And so people like Janus, actually, this is before your time, came up with a stabilization plan for the aqueduct. And in fact, seem to have a page out of it. The first stabilization plan, I can't find it because it's right on the slide. Earlier stabilization work was carried out in 1979 and into the 1980s. They put up a wire structure that was intended to hold the entire structure in compression, with wires going from out here all the way back to the shore. And then in the 1980s, they were putting in these gabions, these what had originally been wooden crates of river stones became mesh, shall we say, bags of river stones to try to prevent scouring to the structure. And the ninth arch had collapsed in 1977, and to stabilize the structure, they realized they had to sacrifice the eighth arch as well. So they were able to stabilize the structure until 1998. And that's when the seventh arch collapsed. And if we were at the Ender's house in a nice dark room, you could see the cables in here. That were, well, you can kind of make out a couple of them still stretching up to the remains of the aqueduct. You can see the anti-scouring protection here. And that's when Janice went back. Well, she didn't work at that point. She'd already been trying to get another stabilization of this going even before this collapsed. A number of efforts, and this would happen, or that would happen. And actually, there were complete plans drawn up in the 2000s to stabilize this again. Then the recession happened. We were down to 6 arches and 8 piers, and most have the trough supports that support the trough, go through. And now the towpath ends at the end of arch 6. What are you going to do? How are you going to save it? You think of a romantic ruin in the Ruskin style that slowly crumbled into oblivion. And there were certainly evidence for that. But not everywhere. Janice found allies. She rounded up people who were interested in preserving the aqueduct. And this is what it looks like today. You're not buying that? No, this is actually a great example of how an aqueduct, or a bridge at least, with Roman arches, can be a tourist attraction. This is the Pont d'Avignon. The only difference between us and them, we don't have nurseries. Any of you know nursery songwriters? We could use a nursery song, because this is famous in much of the world. Ours isn't yet. So, make sure I get this right. The construction contract wound up being just under $1.3 billion. There were soft costs of about $400,000, $1.7 million to stabilize our aqueduct. Major funding sources were New York Works, the Bureau of Historic Sites, and actually a grant that Montgomery County was reassigned to the Office of Park Recreation and Historic Preservation. So even Matt Rosenthorpe and other people in Montgomery County had a hand in stabilizing this. And it sounds like a lot of money, but there have been numerous studies done that show that for every dollar put into recreation, more than a dollar of revenue comes out. And if you ever want to look into that, look at the Empire State Trail. It's one of the most popular pieces of legislation to go through the state legislature in a very long time, because it hit almost every district. And people realized that this was going to help out little town after little town, all the way out west of Buffalo, all the way north of the Canadian border. And so any project that attracts tourists and gives people a nice place to recreate is worth considering. And this one certainly is more than that. It is one of the most iconic features. Look at that. She's got the right idea. Look normally the kitchen is open till late there, and they're probably serving ice cream till 9. Go back to how'd they do? I'll get it started. Because this part I can explain. She's going to have to explain some things. So here's the remaining aqueduct. You can see the towpath. You can see the troughs and the piers here. This is Schoharie Creek flowing up towards the Mohawk. This is the area of work. This is our parking lot. They put in a temporary construction road this way. They wound up not needing this route because this one worked well. And they focused their work here on this end of the aqueduct. Do you want to take it?
So, this project, the first step that they did was they had to shore up the arches so that they wouldn't keep collapsing, especially on them while they were doing the work. So the first thing they did was they supported arch 6. And then they started drilling piles. And they drilled... Okay. So there were original piles in the original construction. And so technology has changed a little bit, and they ended up using what they're calling micropiles. And they had 12 micropiles, and they drilled those down 65 feet until they got enough of a resistance in them. And then they capped that off. So this is basically like building a foundation for a tall building. They capped those off with these concrete slabs. And you keep calling them bookends. And I guess that's sort of what they did in order to... So they had various pores. There were 4 pores, I believe.
2, 3, and then the sides.
4. And as they were doing these pores, they did a lot of measurements to make sure that the concrete was stable and holding, and that nothing was falling down on them. And it works as a bottom line. They did have a couple problems where one of the pores was too close to the actual arch, the remaining arch, and so they moved it out a little bit. So basically the project went along as planned, and they were able to really, they started in November when things were starting to freeze, and they worked through most of the winter, but were able to get it completed by, this was the end of April.
May 2nd.
Yeah, May 2nd was when the canal was
Oh, we didn't rewater until they were out of the canal. They were out of the creek.
So there's 65 tons of concrete in these pores. And then that was just the beginning. Because then the other part that they did was, are you going to do that? Well,
There you go.
the next part was to repoint the existing structure. And the guys that were doing this, a lot of times people don't think of a mason's work. But I said this to them, and I'll say it again today, that masons have some of the best work feelings about what they do. When I get done with a project, I have a pile of paper, and it gets recycled. These guys will have a structure that will last longer than they will. So there's a lot of satisfaction in building a wall, building an aqueduct, and building a structure. These guys took a lot of care. They were really trained in doing concrete work. They said they usually work, on a smooth finish, and there wasn't as much satisfaction. But I think they got to know the artisans that built this originally. Just physically being with their stone and with their mortar for so many months. So really, everyone sort of gave them that process. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Liz. So you can see what one of the trunks that held the trough looked like. There's a lot of vegetation growing in here. And they were worried that the vegetation here in the center seam was going to grow up and split it out. And various work crews were going in and trimming things back and trimming things back. It was really a losing battle. The average root can exhibit 800 pounds of pressure. 800 pounds of pressure from a tree growing. So eventually, you can see, if you just walk down almost any street with a sidewalk, what trees can do to a sidewalk. Well, they're capable of moving stonework pretty easy. So it was significant. This is no small number, 3,200 linear feet. The contract called for 800 feet. The contractor was worried about supply chain issues. So they bought twice what their top estimate of the amount of mortar compound that they thought they would need. And then everything went so well in the project and the weather went so well that they actually had time to use it. Some days I'd go out to the project and there were these 5-gallon buckets of water. And there'd be these towers of empty buckets of water. And she's right, the guys loved doing this work. It really meant a lot to them that they didn't have to stop at 800 feet. It's pretty cool when you think of it. In fact, I invited the construction foreman on the project. He couldn't make it to he's out west, but he really enjoyed it. He said it was the most satisfying project his crew had done in a very long time. Mostly, he's working on utilitarian bridges. In fact, what he's working on now is a culvert that he finds no joy in, but they really enjoyed this. This is really reminded them why they were in the business. And give them their due. Here are a few of the guys and some of the work. So this is Arch 6, and it's had all the scaffolding built into it. Somebody tell me. And we were worried in particular about this arch, so the scaffolding was put into it. And then this large metal plate was put here just over the work area for the micropile cores and the major thrust plot cores. Now what's this up here? This I-beam, well in part, that's holding up this large steel plate. So right there, right on the edge, and protected with this bracing system. Did you guys know what that was?
It was a sling, is what they call it.
A sling.
The Otis Eddy.
Yes, the Otis Eddy sling, protecting the Otis Eddy stone. That's right. The Otis Eddy stone was the last stone on the end. The point we protected this. And of course, this large steel plate also protects the workers who had to be working in this pit down here. And a lot of major construction going on here. And they worked in just about all conditions. It's actually kind of a lovely winter scene. That day it got to like 20 below. They were still up there. So here you can see, right in here, is this is the first floor and the second floor thrust block. I just happened to be out there on the day that happened. That they had pulled the forms off of that and were building the forms for the third floor. Or had built, yeah, that's right, had built the forms for the third floor. Yeah, and actually I think it was curing. Yep, and then Shortly after this photo was taken, the fourth and final pour of the thrust block was done on April 4th. And as Liz said, 65 tons of concrete. And then here are the stonemasons with their buckets of mortar working on the trunks. And there's some massive cracks. You'll be able to see those in a moment. So Slate Hill Contractors did 3,200 linear feet. It's about a third of the masonry joints in the remaining sections of the outlet. So if you've got a trowel handy and you want to come out tomorrow and volunteer, we'll do the best to your wish. The grout color and method was selected to blend with the original construction. I just ran across a note that they were leaded joints. They put in the limestone. Jackson was a special mix that was invented right here on the canal, on the original canal, that sets up in the water, hardens in the water. But then they put lead on the exterior of those joints on the original pointing of the outlet. And I'll show you a little better here. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get that away. Okay. So, some of the anti-scouring protections that were put in. Of course, this is after the canal has been rewatered. But from the towpath, you look down and you can see this brick lattice floor. It's actually held together not just with concrete, but with, you call it wire rope, but they had a longer name for it. I don't know. I guess wire rope is sufficient. It's all held together with wire rope. And this is supposed to protect this area from scouring. It's one of the deeper remaining openings between the troughs. And you can't see the groundwork very well on this slide, but you can on this one. This is the trough, Trill 6, and this is the trough trunk for Pier 6. And you can see this seam is all filled with grout. You can also kind of see the detail I'll show you in the next slide. At the base of this trough trunk is a lot of the stone from the collapsed section of the aqueduct. It was placed around the thrust block, aka the bookend, and around the piers at the base of 6, just to help protect it from floods and trees and everything else. We can get another look at it. And you can see that's pretty tiny compared to all that. It's a lot of grout and a lot of stones. And of course, on the wrong side of the slide, Otis Eddy, builder, 1841. It is literally the last stone on the structure, as you go east. You can see that he also repointed significant sections of the retaining wall on the towpath. And unfortunately, so much of the structure had already collapsed that we had plenty of extra stones from the creek bed. And so 40 of those were chosen. One of the first things I was told as a site manager about this project was, oh, you're going to have to figure out what to do with those 40 stones. And I was like, put them back. But luckily, the construction foreman really took this project to heart and measured every stone and sized them up and decided exactly how to put them together so that we actually had a number of pieces of park furniture, which, as we pointed out, you look at the first to replace the next time the creek floods. And we have one looking back towards the aqueduct. And all of this, I'm actually going to be working with our natural resource officer so that we can clear that in the off seasons, so you can actually see the aqueduct. We did that project. Was it here last year? We haven't cleared it in 2019. Yeah. So we're going to have that done in the off season. There's also a nice bench looking out to the north where the Schoharie Creek meets the Mohawk River. And do you have any questions? What's the original ones? There's 6. We've redone all 6. They're all stable. If you've been over, you probably saw the sign that says, just before you get to that, there's an old sign that says, unstable, stay off. That sign will be coming back. We're actually going to be redoing all the exterior signs at the site in the coming year. And that's what we're doing. I knew that was the second question that helped me. That is a great question. Are we going to be letting people onto the structure? So, my guinea pig was Angela Chandler, the Senior Vice President for Reimagine the Canals. She didn't know she was going to get to go on the towpath, but I took her and a couple of her colleagues up there, and Justine, her landscape architect. But after that, on Path of History weekend, was that last weekend? There was so much going on this week. I think it was last weekend. Yeah. We had a tour at 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. of the Aqueduct Towpath. And we're going to do it again in October. And if somebody twisted my arm, I might be able to come up with one similar between those 2 days. So, yeah. If you want to, just let me know. We'll find a date and time. And yeah. Yes, unfortunately it would. And that's another great question, because not only was the original study meant to put a bridge back over the creek at that point and provide a railing on the original towpath, but it was supposed to do so in a way that did not cause ice streams. And that's over a $5 million project to do it. Which is why we just need for this organization. Yeah, sure. You can ask all the questions. I'm sure she was a straight A student.
So I remember the schoolhouse, seeing photos in your early 1900s, that big gas stand, and it was like near the schoolhouse.
Yeah, it went all the way up on the shore. I have no idea. I know I read it. Yeah, I had to go through all the Janice, do you know anything? Yes.
A lot of
You want to write a book on this? We would welcome that. Thank you so much. No, at this point, no one has written a book on this. I don't know. There's an educator. Do you think he might be interested in doing something? It would make a good PhD dissertation. And then, of course, when that person gets a job and is going for tenure, then they would turn that into a book. So if you have any friends, relatives, kids who are working on advanced degrees in history, please send them my way. We're currently organizing our archives and whatnot. So say. Just if you're a history nerd, there's so many treasures that still very crossing.
You see, we're in America. We're out here.
Well, so we're trying to decide what is archival and what isn't. That's one of the, when a historic site gets to a certain age, just some of the documents of the site qualify as archives. And I don't know the criteria for that. It's just on my project list. I do have someone right now. There's actually this wonderful program in New York State called Green Thumb, where they reintroduce seniors into the workforce. A 20-hour-a-week job. I have two of them. One is on the maintenance crew, and one is clerical. And she's a organization quiz. She's going through. She's created an index of all the maps and posters, and she's organized the inventory we're going to be putting in this. We're going to keep the store going in Big City, and doing a lot of other organizational work. And so we hope to have her tackle more the meat and potatoes of all the documents that we have. Yes.
I don't think this is too much to ask, but I was wondering if you could go back to the slide where the plate was and the beam across the top.
Sure.
And from an engineering equation point of view, could you talk to us about how that was all some of the thoughts and things that you had to think about to know where that plate went in, where the beam went in? And also when I was there, which was many times, down from the beam there's that plate that goes on the side. Not this one under the arch, not the beam at the top, but that one that's on the side. What is the role of that?
And do this entirely in linear geometry. Okay?
That's why I said they get.
That's why I invited her. I'm just going to sit down here.
Yeah, well, you're not going to like the answer. I think a lot of it was done for protection more than structural
Oh, okay.
support.
All right.
Because really it was being supported by the scaffold beneath the arch. I didn't design it, I just had to implement the design. So if I was structural engineer.
The only thing they told me about this plate was that it was to catch the falling debris off of here to keep this work area safe below.
I understand that, but the plate to the right of it is on the wall, on the column. No, below,
Oh,
right
this?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually, there's a single rod going up to the I-beam, so that I-beam is holding that at that height.
Oh, okay.
And then that's putting this in tension. So there's a rod coming down to a giant bolt here. It's on a plate welded to the giant plate. And then another one coming over here, and there's an I-beam. Until I spent a lot of time on the site. Going back behind here, and the same apparatus is rigged up on the other side. You can just see the top of it over there. And that holds that plate up so it can take so many tons of pressure should this really start to degrade while they're working. I mean, one of the reasons they did micropiles as opposed to regular piles, tell me if I'm right, is because they were worried that vibrations from pounding in regular piles would destroy the structure. And so that's why they did micropiles to try to eliminate this.
The previous version of the stabilization, the cables in the bed of the tow bath, they had a sharp edge there. It was finished that off very nicely, and the cables anchored that last piece on there. In this stabilization, you've got sort of a rough in there. It looks like a jumble of stones. Did they repoint those to keep them from crumbling at the end there? This is like a ragged end, like somebody ripped a piece of paper, and there it is. It's kind of rough. It's not a finished end. So what's holding that together?
That's a great question. Do we know if they repointed the end?
If you point it all the way up the sides, here's.
Yeah, no. I never thought to come around and look at the end here to see.
If you have to protect the workers by putting that huge plate there, you're saying that, oh my gosh, there's rocks that are going to fall the stones are going to fall out of there.
Sure.
So once the plate's gone and nobody's standing there, what's keeping those stones from falling down?
So the thrust block comes up to about here.
Yeah.
So it's holding up all
He's
that.
at water right now. I mean, you're in water right now.
Yeah, no, the water only comes up to about here. You can actually see the top of the thrust block sticking out a little bit. But I don't know what was done on the end cap here to support those. I at one point thought to ask why the thrust block didn't go all the way up, and I was told so that if at a future point they do come up with the money to put a bridge across, they can just extend out from this point. But I did think to ask the right question, and you did, and I'm sorry I didn't. I'll give you my card, and I'd be happy to try to find an answer to that. Yeah, I mean, does you see anything in the plan yet? Really?
What's next? For the aqueduct.
Oh, for the aqueduct? Clearing the brush around it. So you can see. That's next on my plate. Giving those limited tours of the aqueduct towpath. And mind you, I do have to issue this disclaimer. Just because we are offering aqueduct tours is not a guarantee that on that day we will be able to go on the tour. Yeah, they go up to like right here. But above that, any other questions?
Also, I read something about they're going to redo or add some interpretive markers or displays or something like that. Is that in the works? Or new signage near this?
Yeah, so there was one interpretive panel that was approved as part of this project. Because we're redoing all the panels next year. They only approved one for now.
When you say all the panels, you mean like the whole park?
The whole park.
Okay.
Yep. Our education program doesn't go on this side of the creek. They only go to the overlook, which is the anchorage for the aqueduct, which is on the east side of the creek. So we're putting that one panel there so that we can better explain to school kids what they're seeing out there. And then when we redo all the panels next year, there will be more panels going up top. And that panel on the east side of the creek at the anchorage there, the overlook point, I made about, I'd say, 8 minor edits to that today. It's going to, David Brooks, our educator, his deadline is after World Engine Show, and then it goes back to the designer and the interpretive programs coordinator, and then as long as they approve those, it'll go to the manufacturer. So by the end of the summer, we should have it.
I'll be back to check on that.
Do that. That's the kind of commitment we want. Yes.
You mentioned in the bed, wire broke. Wire is below grade water. What kind of wire?
I wish I had brought it with me. It's actually,
Is it galvanized or stainless steel?
it's actually not
Chain
wire.
links, right?
It's like a resin.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I was thinking
that's
something
stuff
with
holding
rocks.
the gabions.
Gavins.
Gabions. You could have told me that.
That's her. No, but it's like a resin. It's
Okay.
It's
That?
not going to rust out.
Is that what no, you're talking about the new one here.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is the old one.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was preparing for this, is it true we used to replace those on a regular basis? Yeah. Cables. No. Okay. Newspapers are always the rough draft of history. We could not often entirely correct.
Was
Yeah.
And then pointed out the bed.
It's that.
Right there.
Yeah, this is the bottom. This is what they just did. Yeah, there's a wire
It's a resin.
or a resin
Resin.
mesh. Okay.
Well, it's a resin and then it's got some sort of cloth material, wool material.
Oh, okay.
I should have wrote this. I'll send it.
Okay. That'd be cool. We could have passed it around for showing.
Yeah, what else do I do?
If you were at the last Friends meeting last month, we passed around a mule's tooth that was actually found.
Oh,
They found right there.
my. Oh.
Yeah.
The guys that, the Masons, grew up on a farm, and they really, they knew a lot, they had a lot of interesting history.
Yeah, yeah.
6'5".
They were told that you had asked them, what did you eat growing up?
It sounded like everything was
I thought they'd be here. I thought the ice cream alone would. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you for dealing with the change of venue and being so gracious about it. There are sunsets like this here all the time. All you have to do is be at the visitor center when the sun is setting, and you'll see, at least once a week, a sunset as brilliant as that. Now, in the interest of honesty, I had the craft artist for the region not retouch the sunset, but retouch the aqueduct to bring it out of the shadows. So I try not to work so late as to be there at sunset right now, but you can tell this is done in the wintertime. But it's really one of the special places in the world. And I want to thank you for sharing in all of this with me, and let me know if you are interested in tonight to have to work. And we'll go. Once again, Janice Bonnefield, Rachel O'Dell, Thank you for coming.
Good to see you.
And Karen, frozen ice cream. The ice cream is great. They even have, I think it's vegan ice cream.